What's up guys, this is Ultimate iDevice Vids, and iOS 16 has been released, and today in this video we're going to be doing a battery test between iOS 16 and iOS 15 on all iPhone generations, just to get an overall idea of how the battery performance is on iOS 16 in comparison to iOS 15. And we're sticking with the base model phone from each generation, as including the Pro, Plus, and SE models would just be a little bit too chaotic. And as you can see, iOS 15 is on the bottom and iOS 16 is on the top, and I actually used the exact same iPhones for both iOS version battery tests. I filmed this video over the course of 2 days. I first performed this test on iOS 15, and then I updated all 5 of these iPhones to iOS 16 and performed the exact same test again. And as usual, a few things I want to mention before we get started. True Tone, Night Shift, and Auto Brightness are disabled on all of these devices for both tests, and battery performance is entirely dependent on the condition of the battery in your device, and as you can see for all of these devices, the battery health is showing very high. The brightness levels on these devices are set as close to the same as I could get. It is particularly difficult to match the brightness of OLED displays to LCD displays using the tools that I use, but I did my best to make sure they're as similar as possible. Some of the newer iPhones use the OLED display technology and the older ones use the LCD display technology. So rest assured, any minor display brightness differences between these devices is barely noticeable, if noticeable at all. And with all devices charged up to 100%, we're going to go ahead and turn off the power strip that these devices are connected to for both tests, and we'll get rid of the power cables, and we'll kick things off with 1 hour of YouTube video streaming. So we're going to stream the exact same video at 1080p quality, full screen on all devices for 1 hour. And after a full hour of YouTube video streaming, checking in, the differences between iOS 16 and iOS 15 are very negligible, just varying by a few percentage points on some devices. Next up, we're going to head over to Safari for an hour of web browsing. So for the first 30 minutes, we're going to be loading new web pages and scrolling through web pages on apple.com. And for the second 30 minutes, we're going to be doing that on theverge.com. And I just want to take a moment to mention that you should keep in mind there's always a variety of varying factors that contribute to how your battery life is going to be. Of course, the things that you do on your device. As I mentioned earlier, the condition of the battery in your device, the brightness of your screen, any background processes that you have running, cell signal strength, and so many more factors all play a very big role on how your battery performance will be. And of course, I'm controlling as many of these variables as I can to get the most accurate results. They're all connected to the very same Wi-Fi network. As I said before, the brightness is set as close to the same as I could get. Also, there's no SIM cards or cellular plans attached to any of these devices to create a level playing field in regards to cell signal strength drainage. So you should definitely keep in mind that in the real world, of course, factors will vary all over the place. Also, in a test like this, where we're comparing 2 iOS versions by cross-referencing 2 separate tests, it's particularly important to consider those random variations that are inevitable in tests like this. Because of those, you really shouldn't be analyzing this test percent point by percent point. Just view it as gauging overall battery performance between iOS 15 and iOS 16. Also, this is a pretty simple test where we're just doing a few things, and of course there's dozens of scenarios that the 5 or so things we're doing in this test don't account for. So once again, results will definitely vary in the real world. And checking in after a full hour of web browsing, once again, the numbers are pretty similar for the most part. There's definitely some variations here and there, but overall, just good performance across the board. Next, we're going to head on over to Instagram for 1 hour. For the first 10 minutes, we're going to be looking through stories, and for the remainder of the hour, we'll be scrolling through posts. And checking in after a full hour of browsing Instagram, yet again, same thing to report here for the most part. Similar performance on both iOS versions. Variations this minor between these 2 datasets, I will just chalk up to, once again, random variables. Next up, we're going to head on over to TikTok for 1 hour of scrolling through posts. And after an hour of TikTok checking in, overall same trends continuing, with the 2 newest devices doing slightly better on iOS 16, while all the other older devices are doing slightly better on iOS 15, but nothing substantial enough to even really consider in the grand scheme of things. Next, we're going to head on over to Minecraft for 1 hour of playing the game. And just to let you guys know, the render distance setting in Minecraft is set to the exact same on all of these devices, being 7 chunks. But alright, let's just go ahead and play the game for an hour. Now, since I only have so many fingers, for the first 30 minutes, I'm going to be interacting with the game on the 3 oldest devices, while just keeping the game open on the 2 newer devices. And for the second 30 minutes, I'm going to interact with the 2 newest devices while leaving the 3 older devices just with the game open and running. So that way, all of these devices get the same amount of interaction in the application versus just time with the application open. And after a full hour of playing Minecraft, checking in, the iPhone 8 is just barely hanging on both iOS 16 and iOS 15. And I noticed the iOS 16 iPhone 13 pulled a little bit noticeably ahead over the iOS 15 iPhone 13. Next, we're going to head on over to PUBG for 1 hour of playing the game. And once again, just to let you guys know, the graphics settings are set to the exact same on all of these devices in both tests. And just like I did for Minecraft, since I can only interact with so many devices at one time for the first 30 minutes, I'm going to interact with the game on the 3 oldest devices while leaving the game open on the 2 newest devices. And I'll do the reverse of that for the second 30 minutes. And 5 hours and 9 minutes into the test, the iOS 16 iPhone 8 is the first device to die. And just 1 minute later, the iOS 15 iPhone 8 also dies at 5 hours and 10 minutes into the test. And a while later, 6 hours and 1 minute into the test, the iOS 16 iPhone XR is the next device to die. And checking in after an hour of PUBG, the overall same trends are continuing here, with the iPhone 13 on iOS 16 still having an advantage over the iPhone 13 on iOS 15 by a little bit. Meanwhile, the iPhone XR on iOS 15 is just barely hanging on at 5%. And alright, with the first round of the battery test complete, we're going to head back to YouTube for our second hour of YouTube video streaming, once again at 1080p quality, the same exact video as before. And 6 hours and 27 minutes into the test, the iOS 15 iPhone XR dies. And with the 3 latest generations being the only devices left standing for both tests, we're going to close out the remainder of this hour of YouTube. And checking in after that, as you can see, the overall same trends are continuing here. So we're going to move on to our second hour of web browsing. And just like last time, for the first 30 minutes, we're going to be loading web pages and scrolling through web pages on apple.com. And for the second 30 minutes, we're going to be doing that on theverge.com. And at 7 hours and 37 minutes into the test, the iOS 16 iPhone 11 dies. And a little while later, at 8 hours and 2 minutes into the test, the iOS 15 iPhone 11 dies. And after closing out the remainder of the hour of web browsing, the iPhone 12 on iOS 16 in comparison to iOS 15 is just 1 percentage point apart, as you could see. Meanwhile, the iOS 16 iPhone 13 is 8 percentage points ahead of the iOS 15 iPhone 13. But once again, as I said earlier, I wouldn't take a difference as small as 8% in a very complex and long test as anything other than probably just random variations. Next, we're going to head on over to Instagram for our second scheduled hour. And midway through the hour of Instagram, I noticed the display brightness on the iPhone 12 on iOS 15 lowered a little bit automatically. And I've noticed this sometimes happens on iPhones when they hit 1% just to conserve battery power. So I went to readjust the brightness back up to the same level as the iPhone 13 just to keep things as even as possible. And right when I was about to do that, the iPhone 12 died at 8 hours and 29 minutes into the test. And a little while later, the exact same thing happened on the iOS 16 iPhone 12. Again, the display brightness automatically lowered a little bit. And just as I was going to readjust it back up to the same level as the iPhone 13, the iPhone 12 died on iOS 16 as well at 8 hours and 41 minutes into the test, leaving the iPhone 13 as the only device left standing in both the iOS 16 and iOS 15 test. And checking in after a full hour of Instagram, the iOS 15 iPhone 13 is at 10% and the iOS 16 iPhone 13 is at 18%. So with the iOS 16 iPhone 13 retaining that 8% lead over the iOS 15 iPhone 13, we're going to move on to our second hour of TikTok. And after that, the iOS 16 iPhone 13 is 6 percentage points ahead of the iOS 15 iPhone 13. So overall, same trends continuing here. So we're going to head on over to Minecraft for our second scheduled hour of playing the game. And even though there's no other devices remaining, I designed this test to accommodate if there were. So for the first 30 minutes, I'm not going to interact with the iPhone 13. And 10 hours and 20 minutes into the test, the iOS 15 iPhone 13 dies. And later on, at 10 hours and 54 minutes into the test, the iOS 16 iPhone 13 dies. So there you guys have it. Based on these results, I don't see any major red flags for battery life on iOS 16. Once again though, that's definitely not to say that you'll always have the same experience in every scenario in the real world. There's plenty of things we didn't test for and accommodate for in this video. But overall, results are pretty comparable between iOS 15 and iOS 16 in this test. But I'm curious to hear from you guys too. If you have updated to iOS 16, let me know down below in the comment section how the battery performance has been for you. Thank you guys so much for watching this video, and I'll catch you guys real soon for some iPhone 14 coverage coming right up. Peace out.